The decline of heroism in modern media is perhaps most visible in the genre that once embodied it best, medieval fantasy. For decades, fantasy stories used knights, kings, and quests as vessels for exploring virtue, honor, sacrifice, courage, mercy, ideals that felt larger than any single character. In contrast, much of today's media approaches these concepts with suspicion, irony, or outright rejection. To be virtuous is often framed as naive. To aspire to greatness is treated as foolish or even dangerous. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, or also known as AKotSK, stands apart from this trend. Though based on novellas written in the 1990s, its recent adaptation arrives in a cultural moment starved of sincere heroism. Rather than deconstructing virtue for shock value, it treats honor as something fragile but real, something worth protecting even when it costs everything. While modern writers often struggle to portray aspirational virtues in original work, faithful adaptations like AKotSK may serve as a bridge, reminding audiences why these ideals mattered in the first place. How did we get here? Every era has produced cynical stories, and degeneracy in media is nothing new. The difference lies not in its existence, but in how it is framed. From the 1980s through the early 2000s, popular media often indulged in excess crude humor, rebellious anti-heroes, moral messiness, yet beneath the surface, there was usually an underlying virtue that anchored these stories. Characters might stumble, fail, or behave foolishly, but they still believed in something. Friendship, loyalty, justice, redemption, these were the quiet conclusions viewers were meant to take away. In contrast, much of the past decade's media has embraced nihilism as an endpoint rather than a challenge to overcome. To lack virtuous traits is increasingly portrayed as enlightened or realistic. Hope is dismissed as propaganda. Moral aspiration is treated as self-deception. The prevailing message becomes not that we fail to live up to higher ideals, but that such ideals were never worth pursuing in the first place. Greater purpose is declined, not because it is unattainable, but because it is framed as inherently false. AKotSK resists this cultural gravity. It does not deny the brutality or corruption of its world. After all, it exists within the larger A Song of Ice and Fire universe, but it refuses to let that brutality erase meaning. Instead, it asks a simpler, older question: what does it mean to be a true knight? Episode 4's ending captures this spirit with striking clarity. A knight rides out, the familiar Game of Thrones theme swells, not as a signal of political intrigue or impending tragedy, but as a genuinely traditional fantasy moment. For perhaps the first time in the franchise, the music underscores pure moral resolve rather than cynicism. Baelor Breakspear stands at the center of this moment. As Hand of the King, his presence at the tourney is meant to project Targaryen strength and reinforce political dominance. Yet, when faced with injustice, Baelor abandons that goal without hesitation. He chooses his vows over blood, truth over optics, and innocence over power. He does not posture, scheme, or rationalize. He simply does what is right. The emotional weight of this scene comes from its inevitability. The show has been building toward this choice, quietly reminding the audience that true heroism often runs counter to political success. Baelor's action is not strategic, it is moral, and in a world obsessed with survival and advantage, that distinction matters. Baelor Breakspear is frequently remembered as a king who never was, a ruler who might have been among the greatest in Westerosi history. He possessed wisdom, restraint, and compassion, qualities rare among those who seek power. Yet AKotSK reframes that legacy fantasy with a deeper question. What is the value of a great reign if it cannot protect a true knight of the realm? Baelor's death is not meaningless tragedy. It is the final proof of his character. He dies as he lived, upholding virtue even when it demands sacrifice. In doing so, he preserves something far more important than political stability: the idea that honor is real, that vows matter, and that virtue is worth fighting for. This is where AKotSK diverges sharply from nihilistic storytelling. The narrative does not mock Baelor's choice, or portray it as foolish. Instead, it treats his death with reverence. The loss is painful precisely because the virtue was genuine. The story insists that meaning exists even if the world refuses to reward it. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms does not reinvent heroism, it remembers it. In an era where media often equates realism with despair, AKotSK dares to be sincere. It acknowledges corruption without surrendering to it, and it portrays virtue not as an outdated fantasy, but as a fragile flame passed from one generation to the next. If heroism is returning in media, it will not be loud or triumphant. It will arrive quietly, in moments like a knight riding out to defend the innocent, knowing the cost and paying it anyway. By honouring these moments, AKotSK offers more than nostalgia. It offers a challenge to writers, to audiences, and to culture itself, to once again believe that we can be better, and that striving for virtue is not naive, but a necessary part of truly being human.